Hi, welcome to Planting with a Plan. And today we're going to go over the Hedera Helix ivy plant, otherwise known as the ivy plant. It's very common in the Europe area, possibly because that's where it's originated from. And that actually makes it great if you are out here in the upper northern area of the Midwest, because it tends to be, cold, primarily, not a lot of light, and short summers. And this plant has been stated as being preferably at a temperature of 60 to 70 degrees. And from my experience of putting it outside and bringing it inside, this plant does prefer to be shaded, as well as in the temperature of I would say nothing more than 70 degrees. It prefers 70 degrees. If it is in a high temperature, that's not good for it. You will recognize the fact that this plant will not have any growth, and it will start dying out if it is too much heat. The growth you're going to mostly see on the tips, just in case. And as for the lowest temperature, I would assume it would be a little bit. I don't really find that it has hard time in maybe 40-degree temperature. So if you have a home and it's like going down to 40 because you're turned down the heat, because I turned down the heat, then this plant will be perfectly fine as long as it's not in direct sunlight and it's pretty much shaded from it. And as far as the other recommendations, it says to keep it at moist soil. I personally would not suggest that, because I found that this particular plant is not really familiar, not really enjoying the soil to be too wet. It can get root rot. The best suggestion that I would tell anyone is to wet this plant down completely when you water it. I went without watering it for about 2 weeks, so maybe once every 1.5 weeks, every 2 weeks, water it down completely and just let it completely dry out, because this plant just does perfectly fine with semi-dry soil. So you don't really need this soil to be moist. It can actually get root rot. I've had experience having root rot. And the lovely part about this plant is it doesn't quite just die out on you, which actually explains why it's a fast growing plant, because most fast growing plants are pretty much fighters, survivors in whatever environment. So this particular plant will actually have its leaves kind of a limp on you, like it's and that's the way you can honestly tell, okay, it's time to water ASAP. You want to do that versus doing an overwatering, because when there's that overwatering, you can't really do anything to save it. You're kind of end up having to cut leaves off and trying to do cuttings and regrowth it. And this plant right here, I've had a hard time trying to figure out what's the best way to get those roots to grow on there. As far as this plant though, love it. Beautifully variegated. Put the camera a little close up on it. Has these 3 pointed leaves, which are beautiful, and on the tips you see the ivory color coming off of these gorgeous ivy leaves. And oh, look at that foliage, where you can see kind of like that vein look coming from the inner piece of the leaf coming from the stem. These stems are so gorgeous, but the understanding I have from reading on these stems is that they are very damaging to homes where people have had to rip the walls out on the outside, rip off the outing area, and replace it. So you don't really want to take this plant and let it grow up your nice walls or even your beautiful lamps. Now, I allow my pothos to grow on them and they're fine, but ivy, not happening, just because I do love my furniture as well. So for this plant, even though it has like gorgeous, beautiful little stems, and you can tell with the growth pattern here that it's very, very determinant of growing. What else can I tell you about this plant? As far as this plant goes, I feel like it's like a succulent. It is one of those plants where you can wet it and forget it. I mean, I said I'd take maybe 2 weeks and I might water this plant. And I found that this plant is not necessarily looking forward to a bright light. It is perfectly fine being hid behind a, like, I won't say like a nice dark curtain, but maybe something not super bright so it does get a little light, but it's not really getting a direct light. And it's just gorgeous. Loves loves to just be left alone, to be honest, which I'm messing with it, so it's probably gonna be a little bit cranky because some of these plants tend to be a bit fussy. And that's all I have for you for green ivy, beautiful Hedera Helix. And if you are considering a plant and you're a newbie, definitely would suggest that you pick up this plant because it's simple, it's easy. The only problem you have to worry about is not overwatering it. I know they have devices that you can stick within the pot on Amazon, and those are going to let you know just how much moisture you have in your soil if you're not able to stick your finger in and tell. I generally tend to stick my finger within the soil and I can feel the moisture and I go, you're good. And I would just suggest people, to me it seems better, but if you are one of those like pour before you think about it, definitely would say get one of those those water checkers to place in there. And I've heard it's on Amazon. Let's see here, but other than that, yes, love it. Ideally, I guess I would want to tell people that it might be a possibility to consider not keeping it in a low light area for too long due to the variegation with the tips, because that lightness generally comes from interaction with the sun, and if the plant does not get that, it most likely will turn more of a greener look on the leaves. So if you do like that, you want to try to keep it getting some light at a point, not huge amount of lights, but you do want to get it some good light. And then other than that, that's all I have. Bye.